All right. Good morning, church. I want you to grab your Bibles, open up to Genesis chapter 40. We're going to continue talking about haymakers this morning, those sucker punches, those life's hurts, those moments of life that we see coming, that hit us, those moments of life. Here's what I would say is we're going to flip it up a little bit this morning. What we've been talking about for the first couple of weeks are what do we do when life throws us and hits us with those things we don't want, whether we see them coming or not. How do we handle that? We've been looking at the life of Joseph, and the story of Joseph's life was he constantly, as soon as one good thing would happen, two bad things would happen. His whole life was another bad thing and another bad thing and another bad thing, and his whole life was things that as soon as he started to get ahead, something would happen that he didn't want to happen, and it would hit him. This morning, we're going to look at Genesis chapter 40 in the life of Joseph, and we're still going to look at this idea of haymakers, but it's going to be a little different. What do we do? How do we handle those moments of life when we want something to happen? Something good or something necessary, something that we need. What do we do when we want that to happen and it hasn't happened yet? Or it's not happening fast enough? How do we handle those haymakers of life, those hits of life when things seem to not be happening or happening the way that we want? And so the idea of what we're going to see in the life of Joseph is just what we saw in this video. How do we wait on God well? I tell people all the time, it's not something I'm an expert at. I need this sermon more than any of you. If somebody said, Brad, what are you not good at? I am not good at waiting on anything. I'm not good on waiting on my meal to come out of the fast food window. I'm not good at waiting on the game to start. I'm not certainly good at waiting on God to do whatever God's going to do. I think generally we all have some part of us as human beings who struggle with waiting. And let me tell you why I think it's hard for me to wait, and I don't think I'm the only one. Sometimes I think we don't get waiting right, and I don't get waiting right because I'm not prepared for how hard it is to wait. It seems like an easy thing, but it's really not. And so we need to wrestle with that question, and we need to wrestle with it. Really, there's a couple questions I want to tackle this morning. It is simple and as practical a way I can. I don't think there's a lot to this, but I do think there's power in this simplicity. I want to ask us a question is, one, why is waiting so hard? I want to look at that briefly. And then two, I want to look at what can we learn from the life of Joseph here in Genesis chapter 40 that would show us maybe some things that we can do to make our waiting better. I began to ask myself a simple question. Why is waiting so hard? And here's why that seems like a weird question, because we wait a lot in this life. I mean, from the moment you're born till wherever you are right now, waiting is just a natural part of life. Why is that so hard? Breathing is a natural part of life. It's not hard, normally. Lots of things that are natural. We do it a lot. Why is it always such a hard thing? And I started thinking, really, of all the reasons. I probably started with a list of 8 reasons that I would say this is why it's hard, but I think they all fall into 2 categories. Let me tell you the reason why, as simple as I can put it. There is not going to be a simpler message than I'm going to preach this morning all year long, but just listen. Let me tell you the first one, and I think you already know this. Why is waiting hard? Because of the word uncertainty. And here's what I mean by that. Half of the things that we're waiting on fall into the category of, I don't know what's coming. I'm waiting for some information from God. I'm waiting for some knowledge because I have something I've asked God about, something I need, something I want, and it hadn't happened yet. And I want to know. That's a part of all of us. I think we are hardwired as human beings to want to fix things. We want knowledge. I mean, we hear the phrase in the secular world, knowledge is power. Why? Because the more knowledge I have, the more I have an ability to control my situation. And let me tell you what, there's a part of all of us that desperately, even to our own detriment with God, want to be able to control and fix our own situation. And so half of our problem with waiting is, I can't control this. I need some information. God, would you get me the information? And usually it's something important. We usually don't struggle to wait on frivolous things because most of the time we don't take frivolous things to God. Most of the time we've gone to God and we're waiting for something important. And we need information. And I feel threatened by waiting because I have a lack of information. And because I have a lack of information, I feel like I have lack of a solution. So we struggle with our waiting. And then there's a second category of reasons why I think we struggle with waiting. And it's not because we're waiting on information because of what we don't know. It's because we know something awesome is coming. It is coming, and it's something great that's coming, or maybe something that we really need, but God hasn't given it to us yet. You know, we know that as kids. We know that kind of a waiting when it's Christmas time. And your parents wrap those gifts, and they put them under the tree, and you're like, man, there they are. They're right there, and there ain't a kid in this room who's going to convince me that he hadn't gone over there and torn a little corner off of his presents. He ain't never done that. And the reason why you tore the little corner off that present is because you struggle with waiting. You don't want to wait. My goal every year, different than my sister's, was I'm going to go find all my presents. They're in this house somewhere. I'm finding them. It's double score. I get presents and a scavenger hunt. It's amazing because I couldn't wait. Something amazing was coming, something that I wanted, something that I needed. Look, I think that's all of life. I think you know that there's a job offer that's out there and you hadn't started, or maybe the sale of a home, or college admissions, or medical tests, or adoption, or whatever. There's these life-altering scenarios that we're waiting on, and it makes it hard to wait because we want those things to happen, and doubly hard because we live in a microwave world where we are trained in every single area to get everything immediately. And it makes it hard. Our internet these days, I was just on a plane this week, and people are complaining because the Wi-Fi on the plane wasn't working good. I'm like, man, we have Wi-Fi on an airplane. This ain't good enough for us? Man, I remember when it made all the noises. This is amazing. We get mad because Taco Bell took 2 minutes longer to get our food. They have Taco Bell Express now. Taco Bell Express. I mean, how do you make Taco Bell faster than it is? I mean, your car doesn't slow down. You just throw it out as they drive by. I mean, this is the world that we live in. We struggle with these kinds of things, and so we need to. Here's the reason we need to talk about this. One, we do struggle with it. Every single person struggles with it. It's a natural part of life, and we need to struggle with it because we need to be able to handle these situations. Otherwise, it's going to cause us to, one, either sin or miss what God has for us. We need to talk about it because guess what? It's going to be the rest of your life. I heard an analogy once, and it wasn't an analogy, it was a study. Wall Street Journal did a study about football games that we watch on TV. It's amazing. It's a 60-minute game that they allot 3 hours of television coverage for. And they did a study. They were like, where's all the time going? Well, they found out this in a 60-minute game, when you kind of take away all kinds of different things. So if you watch a game, 60 minutes of that 3 hours is for commercials. 75 minutes of the game that you're watching is players standing around, not playing football. And I'll throw into there screenshots of the cheerleaders and people in the stands and kiss cams and all that. 17 minutes is just replays of times where players have played. They did a study and found on average in a 60-minute football game, in a 3-hour televised version of it, there's only actually 11 minutes of football action in a game. That's depressing. We're sitting around watching commercials, man. It's a scheme and it's a kind of a thing. But you know what? It really is a parable for life itself. The action of life is tiny. And the waiting of life, though, is huge. Most of our life won't be the action. It'll be waiting on that action. So we better learn how to do that well. I think we see a very simple, not going to take a lot of time, very simple but very practical, very powerful 3 things that we see from the life of Joseph as he was in one of these waiting moments here in Genesis 40. So I want you to grab your Bibles. Look in verse 1 of Genesis chapter 40. We've seen this just coming off of a chapter where Joseph's had one of those low moments. As soon as he's kind of rising up the ranks and doing things well, he is imprisoned for being accused of doing something he didn't do. Potiphar's wife thought he was good looking and tried to make advances on him. He did exactly what we should do, run. I mean, that was the best thing Joseph could do and we could do with our sin in those moments, run. Still got falsely accused, got put in prison for a crime he didn't commit, and what's he doing? Waiting. I mean, remember, he got a dream. Probably had several moments where he was thinking, God, but remember that dream? The whole thing where my brothers are going to bow down to me, and I'm in prison right now, waiting for that dream that God promised to come true. And this is the story of that waiting. Look in verse 1. It says, sometime after this, the cupbearer of the king of Egypt and his baker committed an offense against their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and he put them in the custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison where Joseph was confined. This is again where Joseph had found favor in there, and he was even head over all the other prisoners. The captain of the guard appointed Joseph to be with them, and he attended them. They continued for some time in his custody. Verse 5, and one night they both dreamed. The cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, each his own dream, and each dream with its own interpretation. When Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw that they were troubled, so he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in custody in his master's house, why are your faces downcast today? And they said to him, we've had dreams, and there's no one to interpret them. And Joseph said to them, do not interpretations belong to God? Please tell them to me. Verse 9, so the chief cupbearer told his dream to Joseph and said to him, in my dream there was a vine before me, and on the vine there were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, its blossoms shot forth, and the clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. Then Joseph said to him, this is the interpretation. The 3 branches are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office, and you shall place Pharaoh's cup in his hand as formerly when you were his cupbearer. You're going to be out of prison. You're going to get your job back. That's the interpretation to your dream. What a great interpretation to a dream. Now, verse 14 is interesting. I think sometimes we gloss over it. This is the point where Joseph says, hey, while I've got this guy's attention, can I be as bold as to ask a little favor? Since I just did you a favor, you do me a favor. Verse 14, only remember me when it is well with you, and please do me the kindness to mention me to Pharaoh, and so get me out of this house. You're going to get out in 3 days. That's what God said. When you get out, could you just throw me a little bone to Pharaoh and help me get out? Verse 15, for I was indeed stolen out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also I have done nothing, and that they should put me into the pit. When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was favorable, he said to Joseph, I also had a dream. There were 3 cake baskets on my head, and in the uppermost basket there were all sorts of baked food for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating it out of the basket on my head. And Joseph answered and said, this is the interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. He's starting off great. Chief baker's thinking, this is good. 3 baskets are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from you, ! And hang you on a tree. Ooh, he had his own haymaker moment there, the chief baker did. That's a whole other sermon. That's quite a curveball that he just got thrown there. And the birds will eat the flesh from you. Verse 20, on the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, he made a feast for all his servants and lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his servants. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, and Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Left him there in the midst of his mess. The hits keep coming for Joseph. I mean, here he is. He even gave you his own testimony. My brothers have sold me into a pit. I didn't deserve that. Worked my way up. Potiphar's house. Got falsely accused, thrown into prison. I didn't deserve that. I interpret the cupbearer's dream by God's power, and I just ask a simple request that he wouldn't forget me. And at the end of chapter 40, what do we see? Totally forgot him. I mean, the hits just keep coming. The haymakers keep coming. Here we see Joseph, and I can picture him sitting in his cell, waiting to see what would happen next. And And here's the thing, we may not be sitting in a literal cell, but friends, this is our story. We are all hit with days of uncertainty. We are all hit with delays. We are all hit with, because of those uncertainties and delays, we are hit with disappointment, and we are hit with pain in our waiting. And so here's the simple question that I want to learn from Joseph very quickly, very simply. How do we wait? While we sit in our cell. I mean, here's Joseph. I put myself in his shoes because you can read this and think, what do we learn from this? What's the application for a thousands of year old story of Joseph sitting in the cell? But I think of Joseph and he's sitting in the cell and I put myself in his shoes and I'm thinking, all he could do is wait. I mean, he didn't know the future. It's so interesting. He knew the future for the cupbearer. He knew the future for the chief baker. But I got to presume he didn't know his own future. I mean, he knew God gave him a dream. He didn't know when it was going to happen. I mean, he's just sitting in the cell. And he could have taken one of a whole bunch of different approaches. Could have been mad, could have been bitter, could have been angry, could have quit. All approaches that I think we can take as well when life throws us a haymaker. All when life is uncertain, or we don't like the fact that we want something or we need something and God hadn't given it to us yet. We got a lot of different approaches we can take. But what I love about Joseph is he took 3 approaches that I think were awesome. They're awesome and they're so good. In the first 4 verses, this is what we learn. The first thing is what can we do to make our waiting? What can we do while we wait? We can be steadfast. Be steadfast. Just like I said before, I think about Joseph. Think about his perspective. I mean, for Joseph, as far as he was concerned, it was just another day in prison. He's still imprisoned. He may be the leader of the other prisoners, but he's also a prisoner. And the truth is, he really doesn't have any immediate hope of getting out of the prison. He couldn't see into the future. And what he learns is this cupbearer would eventually be his ticket out, but he had no way of knowing that ahead of time. It wouldn't come to pass, by the way, for 2 full years. It wasn't like it was going to happen in 2 weeks. 24 months of just waiting. And what is the secret? When you know something's coming, but you don't know when it's coming, when there's uncertainty. Let me tell you what I think the secret of the future is. The secret of getting to the future is handling the right now, right now. The secret of having a well future and a good future is handling the present well. The secret of big things, the Bible tells us, is handling the little things. Let me tell you one thing Joseph did. He didn't quit. He could have. He could have. He could have been tired of this whole dream spiel that God kept throwing out. Could have gave a whole different response to those guys. He was sitting in the prison, and if he could have quit, here's what quitting looks like. He'd been sitting over there sulking and being like, man, God, why'd you even give me that dream? All it's done is get me into trouble. Told the dream to my brothers. They didn't like it. Threw me in here. I don't see how the dream's going to come true. It's only gotten worse. How am I going to rise to this power? How are they going to fall down at my feet? I'm in prison. Maybe God was wrong. And here comes the cupbearer. Hey, I've had a dream. Can anybody interpret? He could have easily been like, man, I'm done with dreams. Take your dream and get away from me. I quit. I'm out of the dream business. I'm out of staying tuned to God. I don't even want to listen to God anymore. Let me tell you what, there are a lot of people who would turn their back on God because they have been hit with a haymaker with life. They lost a baby or they lost a loved one, and they'll sit in their prison cell and say, you know what, I quit. I quit running to Him. I quit spending time in the Word. I quit spending time connecting to Him in prayer. I quit. A lot of us would look at it and say, you know what, I quit for a lot less than that. We would just look at God and be like, you know what, I quit. I'm not even going to do the things God's asking us to do and keep doing the work He's doing and continue with these disciplines and the habits of grace to strengthen my relationship with Him because I'm just not feeling like it. Let me tell you what, haymakers can knock you down, but sometimes haymakers can just make you not feel great. And a lot of people are run by their feelings and they say, I don't feel like it, which is crazy that they would quit preparing, quit staying in tune, quit rowing, quit working because they don't feel like it. Thank God a farmer doesn't just quit in the months ahead of a harvest because he doesn't feel like getting up. If he didn't feel like getting up and he just quit doing the work, there would be no fruit. Thank God somebody who's a pianist or a band, they wouldn't say, you know what, I don't want to practice anymore. My fingers hurt. I'm tired of singing. They would have the most embarrassing performances that would come. And yet I think sometimes we see these haymakers of life, these disappointments of life, and we get so hung up on it that we quit doing the daily work that needs to be done with the Lord Jesus. And I think of Ecclesiastes of all things, 9:10. What would be the verse for us to remember in the midst of our waiting? Ecclesiastes 9:10. Write this down. What a great verse to memorize. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all of your might. Maybe you don't think it's significant. Maybe the only thing God has for you to do today is to talk to your neighbor or spend time in the Word. But just because it's not that thing that you want to happen or you don't know what's coming, look, just be available, be working, keep rowing. I think so many times we will sidestep these disciplines and time spent with God and quit doing His work because we just simply feel down and out. I think we get so focused sometimes on what we don't have that we miss what we do have around us every single day. Tell our staff, I think so many times I can be like that. I'll focus on the hole and not the donut. I got a whole lot of donut, but man, I'm missing that hole there. Let me focus on all the things that are not happening. I miss the things that are around me every single day. We keep rowing, keep looking. What does that mean? It means that in the midst of those habits, maybe God feels a mile away from you. Maybe you feel like He's not giving you information. That's fine. Keep rowing. When you're in the midst of the darkness and you're sitting on the water, keep your hands on the row, the oar of His Word, the oar of prayer. Surround yourself with other believers, and you may not know where you're going and when you're going to get there. Our job is to do this. Don't take your hands off of those oars. Keep rowing. The fog will lift. Shore is coming. Keep rowing. I love it. Joseph could have said, I quit. I'm out of this business. But an opportunity presented itself, and he says, bring it to me. I mean, in prison, I don't know how this is going to work out. I don't know what's going on here. But I'm still trusting God. Isn't God the one who still answers dreams? What do? We learn in the first 4 verses that in the midst of your waiting today, keep seeking the Lord. Keep disciplining yourself with these habits of grace, prayer, fasting, word, worship, surrounding yourself with believers in the church. Let me tell you the second thing in verses 5 through 8 that we see. Not only was he steadfast, what else can we do to wait well? What do we do in our waiting? We can be steadfast. We can also be prepared. And I kind of struggle with the right word to use there, and so you can either put one of two. You can either be prepared in your waiting or be present in your waiting. Be present. He hadn't given up on his dreams. The thing I loved about Joseph is that had he quit staying in tune with the Lord, maybe he wouldn't have been able to. Had he just turned his back on God, maybe he would not have even recognized the opportunity, and 2, might not have been able to even interpret the dream of the chief baker and the cupbearer. But here he is, because he stayed in tune with God, because he has stayed steadfast, because he is still disciplining himself to know God. When an opportunity presented itself, he saw it. He recognized it. He was prepared for an opportunity that came his way. I mean, I love Joseph. One of the things I think that stands out about Joseph is that even in his own generation into today is because I think he was ready to see God's hand moving everywhere. He was always on the lookout. Always on the lookout. I don't know what's happening here. I don't know what's happening with this dream. Life is confusing. I can't seem to get ahead. But apparently Joseph was the kind of person who was like, man, I'm just in a prison cell, but God's working here. Let me keep my eyes open. Teaching Revelation, I think that's how we're supposed to be sometimes. I think sometimes we get discouraged by closed doors and we want to quit. Trying to share the gospel with my family member or a neighbor, and they don't want to receive the gospel, and doors keep getting shut in my face. And let me tell you what I think Christians do so many times is that we would say, you know what, they're shut, and I quit, and I give up. No, that's not our job. God will, when door closes, God opens the door, but until He opens that door, let me tell you what your job is and my job is to already expect that God's going to open doors. So my job is to be a doorknob jiggler. I'm walking around. Nope, closed. closed, but I expect one of these days I'm going to be prepared. Whenever that door opens, I promise you this, I ain't going to be sitting on the floor. When the door is ready to be open, I'm going to be ready for that opportunity when it comes. My job is they might have told me no 1,000 times sharing the gospel. Door might have been shut in my face 1,000 times. And yes, I'm praying, God, I sure wish the next door would open. Am I waiting? I wish you would do it now. But my job is to not sit down and quit. I'm ready. I'm jiggling handles. I'm looking for opportunities. Joseph was a person who, even though life kept knocking him down and throwing haymaker after haymaker, that dude would get back up and say, look, I'm ready. I'm present. I'm not going to miss opportunities that I have right now. I love that. And look, that's how God works. Usually God does his greatest work when we're sitting in the cell floor of our life. Literally, I think about some of the greatest things that have happened. God does some of his best work in prisons. I think of John Bunyan. John Bunyan writes Pilgrim's Progress in prison. I think of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He goes to prison. He comes out with The Cost of Discipleship. God does work in prisons. And friends, I think sometimes we are not as prepared, one, because we might have quit, and two, because we only have our mind focused on what's ahead. All I can think about is that dream that he gave me. Joseph could have done two things. He could have been mad and say, I'm quitting because I don't understand what's going on. Two, he could have just said, yeah, but all I can think about is that dream. And I'm going to miss everything and every opportunity that's happening around me now because I'm just waiting for that dream to come down the road. I'm living so far in the future for what's coming that I'm going to miss the opportunities that I have right now. I heard somebody refer to it sometimes. We're all guilty of maybe sometimes trying to multi-place. I mean, we've heard the phrase multitask, which is funny to me because there really is no such thing as multitasking, really. I mean, you can try to do 2 or 3 things at once, but the truth is you're really just doing one thing a little bit, stopping, doing another thing a little bit, stopping, and doing one thing and stopping, multitasking. But the same thing's true. I think sometimes if we're not careful, we'll be looking ahead at some awesome thing that we think God's got for us or something that he says that we have to, but we're waiting on it, and we will miss the things around us right now because we're trying to multi-place. I'm trying to be in 2 places at one time. You can't do it. If your mind is only on that, and you're still trying to do what you're doing now, you can't do it. I think there's a part of us where we would need to be present. Don't miss the opportunities that God. I love this because here's a moment where he's still connected to God. He's still doing the work, still rising up the ranks in the prison cells, doing literal work too. He didn't miss the opportunity when God sent him an opportunity. And let me tell you the last thing. You would think those would be the only 2 things. Look, God is working in whatever is happening in your life now. Whatever you're waiting on, if it's a lack of knowledge or a difficult situation or you're waiting on something great, friends, let me tell you what, don't miss the opportunities that are around you right now in your waiting. And here's the last thing I would say that I saw that Joseph did. He was bold. We ought to be steadfast. We ought to be present and prepared. And we ought to be bold. I love this. When you read Genesis 40, you discover that Joseph tells the cupbearer, interprets a dream, and tells him this is for sure. You can mark this down. You're going to be released in 3 days. And you're going to be restored to your position there in verses 12 through 13. And I would think, no doubt, he was delighted to hear that news. And Joseph, interestingly, I think we gloss over this. When I put myself in his shoes, interestingly adds this personal request. Only this, he asked. Would you do me a favor and remember me? So when everything goes well for you and you get out of prison here in 3 days, could you just do me this kindness and just mention my name to Pharaoh? Let him know that I'm in here. Let him know that I'm falsely accused. Let him know that I did his personal cupbearer a favor and interpreted his dreams. Could you do that and help me get out? And here's the thought I had. It seems like maybe Joseph just violated the rule that I just told you. I mean, it seems like you could make a case. Some people would look at this and be like, oh, see there, Joseph just violated the be present rule. Is he not trusting God? Is he trying to rush things here? Is he trying to rush ahead of God? He's not faithful where he's supposed to be at here. Did he just violate the above point? I mean, on one hand, he's faithful and he's ready to serve God where he is, and that's what I just said we should do. But on the other hand, I see something, and he's not multi-placing. He's not trying to do them both at the same time. But on the other hand, here's what I know about Joseph. He doesn't want to stay there forever. He doesn't want to stay in the prison. Yes, God's given him opportunities, but he wants to get out of them one day. He might look around, and what I'm saying is be present. Maybe you're waiting on some news. You're waiting on some information so you can find a solution in your life. Maybe you're waiting on something good to happen. Yeah, don't miss where you are right now, but don't get so comfortable in this that you miss what God has for you when he's ready to give it to you. There's a point where I think Joseph looked around and he said, yep, this is my life right now. And I'm going to recognize this is my life right now, and I'm not going to miss it. But this ain't my whole life. I love that about Joseph. Don't forget about that thing that maybe God told us. I mean, 2 years later, here he makes a request, a bold request. God, I know you have me in here for a reason. I know that you're sovereign. I know that you're working all these things together. I mean, we're going to see that when we get to Genesis 50. Well, y'all all meant for evil. God meant for good. But he still takes advantages of the opportunities that are presented to him. And the only way he saw that was he wasn't just sitting on his biscuit, not wanting to risk anything. So I think there's a fine balance is what I'm trying to say in your waiting. God's got something for you ahead, and you've got to wait on whatever it is. Maybe something you're looking forward to or something you don't know. I ought not just get my eyes so focused on that I become discouraged and disappointed and miss the opportunities that are around me now. And then what I love with Joseph, though, is he still had his eye on that where he didn't get so entrenched in this that when God finally opened that door that he didn't see that or take hold of those opportunities. Had he had just said, you know what, this is it. This is as good as life can get. I'm just going to be the chief over the prisoners. He wouldn't have even thought of that as an opportunity. I think the longer he stayed in prison, probably after the first 6 months, he's thinking, you know, maybe I'm going to get out of here one day. But after month 12 and month 18 and month 24, he's like, man, I ain't never getting out of here. I'm not even going to think to ask people to let me out. Man, he was presented with an opportunity and he took it. And friends, I think this is the point that I almost didn't write in this sermon, but let me tell you why that matters to me. Because of the sermon series that we just preached before this. 28,287 days. That's the average lifespan of a human being on the planet. I don't know if I'll have tomorrow. James chapter 4 tells me you don't know if you're going here and there. I mean, if it's the Lord's will, I'll wake up tomorrow. I may go and do this or that, but I don't know. And here's what I would say is, man, I think there's a lot of times we just get comfortable. And we miss opportunities. And we get to the end of our life for the Lord Jesus and think, I didn't live boldly. I just kind of coasted on in and missed opportunities. And I'm thinking, man, I'm 45. I don't know how old you are. I'm 45. I read Genesis 40 and I think, man, I ain't missing any more opportunities. God throws something in my way. I want to make sure that I'm so in tune to Him. I am so steadfast in a walk with Him. I am so prepared looking for opportunities that when He gives it to me, friends, I want to tell you something. I don't want to miss it. I want to not get so used to the place that I'm in that I miss what's next that God has. So if there's anything else that God wants for me to do, and if there's anything else in this life that I have, whether it's tomorrow or another 35 years for the kingdom, let me tell you what Brad Kirby's going to resolve himself to do. To go and do it now. That's what I'm going to do. I don't want to wait. And let me tell you what, friends, I have prayed a prayer every single day of my life. Every single day as a Christian, I've prayed one thing over and over and over again. I've yet to see it happen. I prayed that God would one time in my life let me be a part of a movement. And He may or may not let me be a part of that, but I pray, God, one time in my life, I'd like to be a part of something that's so big that even if I took credit for it, it's bigger than that. Nobody would believe it. Clearly, something's happening that's beyond our capability to explain outside of God. I would love to be a part of it. And I'm going to tell you this. If I even sniff an opportunity where God says I can be a part of that, I ain't going to wait on that. I'm taking it. And I'm going to jiggle handles until that door opens. And I'm going to expect it to open and pray that it'll open. I'd love to see that happen at Houghton. I'd love to see it happen at Eastwood. I'd love to see it happen now. I don't know if it will, but I'm going to stay prepared. I'm going to stay and know that God can do those things. If God can cause revival in Nineveh, He can do it in Houghton. I'm going to stay in tune with the Lord. Do bad things happen in my life? You bet. Half of them, or more than half of them, are on my own fault. I ain't going to quit. I got to believe it's a real temptation to you. It's a real temptation for me. There are a lot of days where I'm like, I want to throw my hands up and quit. I'm going to be steadfast, and I'm going to stay in tune with the Lord. I'm going to stay in His Word. I'm going to keep disciplining myself. I'm going to quit. I'm going to keep being here, being with the people of God. I'm going to surround myself with godly people. I'm going to fast and seek the Lord, and I'm going to be prepared. I'm going to jiggle handles. That expectation that God's going to open one of them doors one day, and He'll answer my prayer. And when He does, my prayer now is that I'm going to be bold enough to take that opportunity when it comes, to take it. I think we ought to all do that. 3 simple things. I mean, that's the only 3 things I can see here. What do you get from this? I think Joseph took an opportunity, man. He didn't know how many he was going to have. How many more opportunities he's going to have? He's going to waste away. Nobody even knows he's in this prison. Thank God he was tuned into God. He was jiggling handles, and when he saw maybe what might be his only opportunity, he took it. He took it. I don't know how many God's going to give me to answer those kind of prayers or to get me to wherever He's calling me to be or to see that dream happen in your life or to move on past the situation you're in, but I think a lot of times we just miss them because we ain't looking. Like, I don't know what you're wading through right now. I don't know what season of life you're in, but man, maybe before you go to bed tonight, you take out Genesis 40 and read it again and say, God, make me like Joseph. Maybe you come to this altar in a minute and say, God, you know what, I've gotten so focused on me and so focused on my situation and are so focused on the mess in my life or so focused on what I don't have in my life that I've left no more room in my vision for where you're working. Make me like Joseph. God, make me the kind of person that knows you so well. I'm looking and I see you at work in everything. You're working. Maybe you come to this altar and you just lay it before the Lord. Maybe you come and repent and say, God, I've been a poor waiter. I'm not good at this waiting thing. Help me. Maybe you're trying to control your own situation. Maybe you're trying to play fixer for whatever you're in, making it worse, because that's what we do. You come here and say, God, I'm royally screwing this thing up. Help me. Maybe you're trying to do this all by yourself. Maybe you come up here and say, you know what, I'd like to be partnered with some other believers, and maybe I'd like to join the church. Whatever it is, I pray that you would take this opportunity. It's an opportunity staring you right in the face. I pray that you take this opportunity and come. Whatever it is, I pray that you would respond however the Lord's leading you. Let me ask you to stand right where you are. We're going to have a time of invitation. I'm going to pray. You come. You come as the Lord leads you. Father, we just thank you. We praise you. I thank you for your word, God. It is fascinating. It is interesting. It is both unbelievably old and time-worn, but incredibly applicable for our lives today. God, it is true. Life is a life full of waiting. I mean, I can't even imagine what it would be like to just have everything immediately. It's not good for us. God, we are people. We are like sheep who wander off, and we are not inclined to be people who are good at trusting. I just pray for your people in these moments, God. I pray that they would respond to your word. Maybe these simple, timeless truths that we learned from Joseph have pricked their heart in some way, and they need to just do business with you, God. I pray that they would come and get on their faces before you. Take advantage of this opportunity you're giving them now. Whatever it is, God, I pray that you speak to us. I pray that we would listen. I pray this, Jesus, in your name. Amen.